All right. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Vaadin webinars once again. Today we have topic debug window, which is one of the hidden gems in the Vaadin framework. Together with me, I have Teemu from the framework team.
Hi all.
And yes, without further speaking, let's get to the topic. So, like many of you probably know already, the debug window is something that you can use in your Vaadin applications to find out details about the application. It started, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, many years ago anyway. It was originally something like Firebug extension that we were using for logging the events of Vaadin applications on the client side. But since then there has been a lot of new features.
Yes, and actually nowadays the framework team actually uses a lot of the debug window because it's really helpful when you're doing any kind of component implementation, so you're making your own components, or if you happen to have some layout problems or what else you might have in your program.
All right, but let's have a look at it. So how does it look?
Yes. So here I have the basic address book demo I took from GitHub.
So this is the tutorial application.
This is the tutorial application, the address book containing the grid and some editing available on the right side when you're selecting a row.
Basic form and grid.
Yeah. Basic CRUD. So how do I activate the debug mode, the debug window? I just add a $debug on the URL. So using a get parameter to open it up. And now we can see it here on the left corner of the page. And well, debug window, the name actually is a bit misleading because it's not really used for debugging, but more about inspecting the possible problems.
Right.
So
maybe that would be a better name for the window.
We need to reconsider the naming and perhaps rename it at some point.
Makes
but
sense.
Yes, let's start with the debug window. So the first tab we have on it is the debug log. So it behaves like any Vaadin window. You can move it around, you can resize it, and yes. So the debug log. Or did you have something?
Yeah, I'm just asking. So these are the basic events of UI on the UI layer, or
yes,
like layouting, communication, everything.
Basically, the debug window, the debug log, actually contains any kind of communication, layouting, all this event information. It's displayed here in nice form, and yeah. Well, the debug log is not really that useful unless you're encountering some problems. So if your UI doesn't behave the way you expect it to, you kick out the debug window and you actually see that, hey, here's some exceptions or here's some warnings or so on. And if there is some weird problems, the contents of the debug log might actually make sense for the framework developers to help you fix the bugs.
Right.
The debug window is not always usable in every Vaadin UI, so there's actually a limitation that you need to enable before you can actually use it.
So you mean in a production applications, or?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So I was about to say that maybe it doesn't make sense in every application, but there is a configuration for that.
Yeah. So the Vaadin servlet configuration production mode, it needs to be false for the debug window to show up.
Right.
So if I change that to true and redeploy, then I no longer get the debug UI, and I cannot access any of the data in there.
Okay.
So let's get back to the debug window itself. So let's go to the next tab, which is general information. So As you can see, it lists things like which Vaadin version is currently in use, which is the current theme, how the communication is done.
Right. So if you're using push, for example, you can see that the channel is push, or now it says XHR. So now we are HTTP connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
And well, there's not much more about that, but if you're using, for example, a new version of Vaadin and something is broken, you might want to check that your widget set is compiled against the newest version,
right,
because that's quite often a problem.
Yeah, true.
And it will actually show up here as a red background on the row that is.
Yeah, so if the versions don't match.
If the versions don't match, it usually highlights the rows.
And that's typically one of the first things to check if your application is misbehaving between client and server. So making sure that the client-side engine or the widget set is the same as the server version.
Yes. So then, actually, since the text here is a bit small, why don't we go through the menu of the debug window? So we can actually
configuration. Yeah.
We can actually change it to be a bit bigger, so we could actually see a bit more of it.
Right.
There's also, you can always use a smaller font, but that might not be as useful. All the icons that seem a bit confusing, they usually have this tooltip, so hover over it for a moment, and it will tell you what it actually is.
Yeah, right.
And here in the configuration, we also have the different kind of development modes, which are really useful when actually doing the component development. So, for example, you have the Superdome Mode, which
so what does it do? So it opens up the client side on Superdome Mode?
Yes. So basically, Superdome Mode is a server that is running and compiling the widget set for you. And it also sends the source code to the browser and tells how the client-side calls match with the source code. So you can go to your Chrome inspector and put some breakpoints in the source code.
Right.
And the browser will actually stop at that point, and you can go step by step and see where it goes wrong.
Yeah, that sounds very handy.
Yeah. There's also the reset button, which removes any custom sizing and formatting I've done here in the debug window and throw it to the right lower corner.
Okay.
But let's not do that now.
You can minimize and maximize the window, if I recall correctly. So
yes.
You can.
There is a minimize button, which throws it somewhere currently to the lower right corner.
Move it around.
It becomes really small.
Yeah.
So it's not in the way.
Yeah.
And you can always get it back.
Yeah, when it's quickly available.
Yes.
But
there's also the close button for the debug window, which actually it will close the debug window completely.
Surprisingly.
Yes. And if you want to get it back, you need to reload the UI with the debug parameter.
So you'll always get that with the reload.
Yes.
All right, but let's continue with the walkthrough.
Yeah, so next we have a component here, hierarchy. So in here you can see how the connectors are what's the hierarchy of the connectors, which connector is connecting to what UI element, etc.
So by connector you mean the client-side part of each component.
Yes.
So label connector is for the label and so forth. Yeah.
So let's see what our UI is currently consisting of. So we have a UI connector, which has a horizontal layout, which is the base layout of the UI. Then we have a vertical layout, which is currently containing this text field and the button and the grid.
Right.
Actually, there's a horizontal layout for storing the text field and button side by side.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
Yes.
But you can see the whole structure here, basically. So that's the DOM structure, and that's also the server-side component structure.
Yes, it's the same structure for both of them. In addition to actual components, the hierarchy also contains extensions. So for the grid connector, we actually see 3 copies of text renderer, which is an extension that handles the column representation on the client side.
Right.
So let's see what else we can do here. So when I click on the grid connector, it will highlight the grid component.
Nice.
And at the same time, in the console, it will actually print out the hierarchy until that component.
So you get the same in Java.
Yes.
Java here. Okay, nice.
And the next one is inspector, basically. So with this tool, you can hover over the components and it will highlight and show you some information. And when you decide that you want to see some extra info, for example, for this button, you click on it and the inspecting stops. And now you can actually see here is the state of this button. So it's a shared state between the server and the client.
Right, right.
And it contains all stuff like the caption, what widget are we using, what is the size of the button, so on. So all the relevant data is here.
Yeah, yeah.
Then we have a tool that is really good for any application developer and should be run regularly.
Yeah.
So in Vaadin, you can occasionally make layouts that don't really work the way that they are supposed to.
Yeah.
So right now, if you take a look at my application, you will notice that the grid is actually taking only part of the page. Even though at some point, I think I put in set size full for the grid, but it's only taking some portion of the page. So I can click here on the potential problem tool.
Right.
And this will check all the layouts for me. And as I suspected, it says layouts analyzed, one top level problem.
Yes.
So there is something wrong with this grid. And when I click on it, it will actually show me what's wrong.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's a height problem. The vertical layout has no defined size in height sense. So it has a width, but not the height.
So the vertical layout where the grid is inside this vertical layout. Yes. Okay.
So that vertical layout has no size, but grid is relative
to that size.
So it cannot calculate the size of something it doesn't know.
Right, right. Makes sense.
So how do we actually fix this? Well, since I already know that there's a problem here, I just tell the vertical layout to have a size.
So the left
100%.
here is the vertical layout, and
yes,
and you set the height to 100%.
I tell it to use the height 100%, and just reload, and look, the grid is already full size. And if I click on the inspecting again, it will say no top level problems.
Right.
So now there are no problems in my UI.
Very good. At this point, I forget to say this in the beginning, but if you have any questions during the webinar, there is the forum chat or the forum thread you can use to present questions. Go there and shoot us with your questions, so we can answer them here. But yes, maybe we continue.
So this layout checking, that's something that you should do regularly with your UIs. So try every now and then that your layout does not have any problems. They might not be always as visible, and they occasionally might get you by surprise. So you need to be really careful with the layout.
Right, right. And I know that the layouting is one of the hardest problems the application developers face today. So that really helps to solve this.
Thanks for the designer. That's actually a bit of a history, this layout problems, because you can try the layouts in the designer and just get the structure from there.
Right.
At least that's the theory.
And speaking of designer, I think the next step is somehow...
Not the next one.
Okay.
But let's skip ahead a bit.
Yeah, okay.
So actually with this debug window, you can get a declarative design for some component and all the subcomponents. So for example, if I click on, if I click here, this is basically the whole UI.
Right, so everything is
So clicking on this part of the page, I will get a declarative format HTML of this whole page.
Okay.
So like this. And it says design file for component sent to server log.
It didn't write it here?
No, that is a security issue.
Okay.
So if there's something that the user of the of the application shouldn't see, it might be visible in the declarative format.
Right.
So we try to prevent any problems in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. If you accidentally use the debug mode or do not enable the production mode in your production, you might leave this.
Yes.
Okay, I understand.
So basically, it sends the format over here to my Eclipse.
Okay, and you can see the structure here.
The structure is here. Some data is here, and you can actually just copy paste this into a design file.
Yeah, and use it in Vaadin Designer.
Yes.
Okay, very handy.
Yes. So let's get back to the
We skipped
previous one.
Yeah,
we
okay.
skipped one.
Okay.
So we have the option of optimizing the widget set. So if
Oh,
your
right,
users are bored of downloading the big widget set file every time, you can optimize it by removing some stuff that doesn't get compiled every time then.
Right. Yeah.
So for this UI, it says that I am using a list of connectors. So these are the ones that our application is currently using.
Yes.
And for the optimization,
There are like 10 of those or something like that. Yes.
yes. So you have your widget set XML,
Yeah.
which is compiling the widget set, and you have to copy paste this into it, and that tells it to use this optimized connector bundle loader factory.
Okay.
It sounds really enterprising, the name. And it gives you also the Java code you actually need for the optimizing bundle. So you copy paste this Java file into your project.
So basically, this is full optimization code.
Yes.
You need to.
This should contain all the things you need to make your widget set as small as it possibly can be.
Yes, and widget set optimization is something that I truly recommend for every production application at least, so that you get rid of those widgets in your JavaScript that you don't actually use, and that might change over time when you're developing the application. So doing that every now and then makes sense.
Yes. So basically, every time you add a new component that's not previously in the optimized widget set, then you need to add it to the actual bundle. So yeah, but that's something that could be done for everyone.
Yeah.
Then onward, this is something that's more interesting to the component developers again. So here we have all the server to client responses that are sent. So this is the first initial response that contains the UI information, how this page is structured, what do we have in here.
Okay, yes. So this is from the server to client responses, yes.
So basically this tells that there is a UI connector and a text field connector in the initial load, and a lot of shared state information. And this shared state is something that is, as mentioned before, stored between the server and the client. Anytime the server makes updates to the state, it will be sent to the client, and the client will update accordingly.
Accordingly, yes.
So if something goes wrong, you can always go dig here and see what state is in the faulty state.
This sounds that it's most useful for if you are developing your own components. So if you are checking that the communication is correct, yes, there is something wrong with the rendering part of the component, and it's good to see here that yes, communication is working. We get the data.
Yes. But that's about it for the communication, so there's not that much interesting there for your everyday developing needs.
But then again, if you are doing those own components, then it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we have a little tab for the Vaadin test bench. Do you want to tell more about the test bench?
Yes. So test bench is automated test tool made for Vaadin especially. So it gives you a logical way to test the user interface in the browser. So it's based on Selenium, and you can command the browser through a Java API in your JUnit test. So that's what TestBench basically does, and this is an addition to that. So how does this work?
Yeah. So the basic idea behind TestBench 4 was that we need to make it really easy to find things in the page that you want to find. So we added a picker that can find you the components you are interested in. So for example, let's say we want the phone number.
Yes.
How do I get this text field that is
Right.
representing the phone number so I can modify it?
Yeah.
So basically I just click the picker and click the
generates
component, and it generates me a element query, which is something that TestBench 4 uses for element finding. So for example, in that case, it's a text field with caption phone.
Right.
And you can copy paste this directly to your test file, I mean the test class. And once this is executed, you should have a phone text field with the correct element in it and a nice API to actually access the features of the text field.
Yeah.
Of course, it works for all the parts of this web page, so any component is findable with it.
Yes. Okay. So you can click buttons through this API and so forth. Okay. And full Java, it doesn't look like Java, but there is.
It is actually. This is just Java code.
Okay.
You can copy paste it directly into a test.
Yeah, you do the JUnit file.
Yes.
Okay. Very good.
Yes.
That's about it.
That's about it. Do you have any funny questions?
Well, we can check the forums first. So if there is any questions there. If you don't have any questions now, you can always ask them later on. Apparently there is no questions in the forums, but there was one question that I was presented before. So people were wondering whether they could open up this menu or a debug window programmatically in their applications. That's how to force it open.
Yeah, that unfortunately is not possible right now.
Okay.
It's something we might consider if we provide some kind of more develop-oriented.
Yeah, so currently there is no way.
Currently, the only way to get it up is to use the URL parameter.
Right. But you can do that with the redirect or something like that. So that should be a reasonable workaround.
Yes.
If you need to do that.
I hear there was also questions about theming of the debug window.
Yes, that's one thing that people like everything to look good. I don't know if the debug window is the most relevant thing there, but
yeah,
it's been asked.
Basically, the debug window is a just collection of divs.
Yeah.
So you can use your basic CSS theming. It has relatively
the same way than in the Vaadin application.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have relatively same class names, and you can find all the things you need. You can fiddle around with the CSS, for example, in the Chrome inspector. Try to make it behave the way you want it to, and copy those changed rules into your theme file.
Right. All right. That was nice walkthrough. All the features covered.
I think so. Yes.
Okay. So I really encourage everyone building those Vaadin applications to take a look at that. It's very helpful for even everyday work to check, especially with the layout problems. You much more quicker find them. Like I said, if you have any further questions, there is the forum thread now, and check out the webinar there later on if you want to. Nothing else from me today? No. From you?
No.
Okay. We say thank you and
thank you.
See you in the next webinar.
See you.